this is conversational AI. We need to make sure we're thinking of the customer first before we build anything. At the end of the day, an organization at its very core builds a chatbot or a conversational AI interface to reduce costs. We need to always be on the lookout for that we're building something that really gives customer value as opposed to just business value, and then how we quantify it.
Not everyone makes the news, but behind every growth-driving experience, product, and transformation are experts who shape the outcome. Welcome to Behind the Growth, a podcast for digital leaders and those aspiring to become one. Each episode features a candid conversation with a remarkable individual. Join us as we focus on their struggles, wins, and lessons learned you won't find anywhere else. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Behind the Growth, where we dive into the mechanics of technology and management that propel businesses forward. I'm your host, Imran Mian, and today we're thrilled to have Sabih Ahmed, a distinguished director of AI products, joining us. Sabih has been instrumental in shaping the conversational AI landscape, and today he'll share his insights on how businesses can effectively implement these technologies. Sabih, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and the audience, good afternoon. Thank you for having me over. We're very excited to talk to you about conversational AI. I've been a practitioner of it for almost a decade now, so very excited to talk about it and share whatever I've learned along the way with the audience and team.
Wonderful. So, Sabih, maybe to start us off, could you explain what conversational AI is? There's a lot of hype, but let's start from the basics and why it's becoming a critical tool for businesses today.
For sure. I think as we kind of started, right, as conversational AI, so obviously it is a subset of the kind of larger definition of AI. So it is a type of an artificial intelligence. Where it is different from everything else is really the application of it. And so the easiest way that kind of I think probably the most easiest to connect definition of conversational AI that I've used over the years is it's really the subset or the subfield of artificial intelligence where we teach machines to talk to humans in a human-like way. The thing that sets humans apart from every other animals in the animal kingdom is our ability to speak and then communicate. And then conversational AI is just that, where machines can talk to us in a way we understand, we can comprehend, and then it's an engaging back and forth dialogue.
Moving to our conversation to, you mentioned applications. So practically speaking, how should companies go about identifying the right use cases, for example, for conversational AI within their operations?
So I think as a concept, obviously, a conversational AI has very broad implications because you are talking about a system or a kind of machine talking to humans in a human-like way. Just about anything and everything where we would expect a human being to require engagement with another human being potentially could be applications for where conversational AI can play a role. I think in terms of the general rule of thumb, I think because it's machine driven, we usually tend to look at things where it's a repetitive task, it is high in volume, and it is low in complexity. At the end of the day, as much as we have made tremendous progress in terms of AI advancements and overall understanding of things, anything about the best applications of conversational AI, the golden rule is the less nuanced the conversation or the transaction is, the better the performance will be. So anytime we are choosing a use case, we just need to make sure that it really fits in the same framework or formula every time in thousands of times. So low complexity, high volume, repetitive tasks, conversational AI is your answer.
Interesting. So let's say once the potential use case is identified, what are the key elements in building a strong business case?
For any organization, I think the use cases, again, as you are identifying the use cases and then you want to build it up into a business case or some sort of an executive package where you want to start socializing eventually to build a business case, it is important to kind of look at the final objectives that you're kind of delivering for the organization, because at the end of the day, yes, it is innovative technology that can give very good commercial outcomes, but we need to have the business outcomes first. And That's foundational to build a good business case. So usually conversational AI business cases are more or less, if I'm clubbing them together, around three types. So there is the cost savings or operational efficiency play, where we could build kind of complete business case around it. There is sort of a automation and just pure play kind of time saved. Similar to efficiency gains, I think one is more around just saving the cost of interactions, and another one is around saving the cost of kind of actually having to do it, taking the repetitiveness out of it. And then finally, the big one is about conversions in general. So obviously, conversational AI can be used in different conversion or sales use cases. So that's another big area. So that always remains to be a play. And again, as I said, I was clubbing them together. I think as we see in the market, I think about 70% of use cases of conversational AI are around the customer experience space, because that's where we think and we have seen results of kind of tremendous success coming out of conversational AI.
Once you have the business case figured out, now the next step is how do you gain executive alignment and buy-in? How do you make it so compelling that the execs want to sign off? And what are some of the strategies you'd recommend for persuading the C-suite executives to invest in this particular technology?
That is a great question, and probably the most important question. I think even if you have a business case, if you don't have the right sponsors and the kind of right executive buy-in, you're really kind of this will only be a pipe dream in PowerPoint decks and pieces of paper, which wouldn't see light of day. So I think what has worked in my years in this space is how you go about doing the quantification of the benefits, as well as at the same time getting them excited about the prospects of the technology. Obviously, size of the organization, the culture of the organization determines an early adoption versus a late adoption perspective towards technology. Like I think as we see across Canada, larger organizations tend to be a little bit of a laggard because they tend to play safe. At the same time, they have a lot of kind of legacy applications being in their systems. So any kind of radical changes in the way they do things and then make things is a little difficult. Whereas smaller or medium organizations, they can probably move fast, but they don't necessarily have the funds to do that. I think as you go into the executives realm and try to secure the buy-in, I think obviously you need to have a compelling business case, but also one thing that I've seen work very well is giving them the assurance that potentially we are going to sandbox or just pilot this technology out before we actually roll it out to customers. There is always a great debate in executive forums about how much technologically cutting edge we want to be. And I think to practitioners, conversational AI definitely is not cutting edge. It has been there for almost a decade now in a big way. But to an executive board who are not necessarily as technology proficient, it is a big leap. And being able to actually assure them that there are going to be sandboxes and pilots where we are going to run closed loop experiences, collect feedback, and then actually get the right people validating those feedback. So case in point for a customer experience bot or chatbot would be the actual customer experience live advisor who actually would have serviced the customers, looking at the bot experience and the AI experience and then validating it before we even take a step towards making it public or publicly accessible. I think that really has worked wonders for me. And I think the other piece I'd probably say is just, and then going back to what I really said, quantification could be quantification of benefits internally, how it benefits the company, but also quantification of benefits in similar sized companies. So I think the reference really helps. If you're building it for a fintech or if you're building it for a large FI, there are always partners within Canada, down south or across the kind of Atlantic, where you will find partners who have done this, who have built this, and who have success stories. I think that reference validation also really helps. Most organizations usually would have partner organizations that they lean on from a strategic viewpoint or just general partnerships for commercial purposes. Kind of getting a validation from them also has been super useful, because you'd much rather hear it from someone who's on the same boat in terms of the type of business they do, as opposed to, again, a technologist who's trying to sell a business or just excited about technology in general.
Yeah, I guess to summarize, it's showing them the ROI, making sure all the risks have been identified, and there's a governance structure and a plan and validation. Like you said, there's
Yes.
validation. Unless you're like an early adopter, validation definitely helps. Let's say you got the business case, you got the executive alignment. The next step, you've done the POC or you're doing the POC. Could you walk us through the typical steps from development to deployment of the solution?
I think we already discussed kind of identifying the use cases. I think really the whole process kickstarts there itself. So knowing that the success in any successful deployment of conversational AI really boils down to the use cases that you have identified. So I'd say probably for the uptime time, the validation of those use cases across the board, kind of knowing what you want to build is the right thing to build is very important before you start the journey. And once you have done that, I think depending on the size of the organization, sometimes you would probably get other partners involved who are subject matter experts in helping you procure partnerships or vendors who are going to help you do that. Or you just decide how you want to build it. I think one big question that comes even before the implementation journey begins is, do you build internally or do you partner? And I think that's a big question that more often than not companies struggle with. Obviously, there are companies who are more comfortable building it with partnership because they want to lean on subject matter experts to come in, help them understand what needs to be built, how it needs to be built, and then hand them over a product or an experience that they can run with right away. And then there's no kind of learning curve involved in terms of building it. The learning curve comes in terms of operationalizing it. And then there are companies who are very protective of their tech stack and also take a lot of pride in building talent internally. So they want to build it in-house. So obviously, between the paths that you choose, the downstream implications for steps involved might change. But generally speaking, once I'm guessing you have the answer to how you're going to build it, you'd probably start engaging with the industry around selecting a partner. The interesting thing about conversational AI is because it is still fairly a new space, there are partners or vendors of all sizes. You get very small boutique shops where they have built something very exciting and fancy, which probably can solve your needs. But and then you have the FANG or the kind of Googles and IBMs and Microsofts of the world who have built enterprise grade to do well-known technology stacks that can do it for you. So question comes in is obviously going back to my earlier statement, if you are partnering, how are you building it as well? Because usually most of these companies, the technology companies, are going to come with a stack only. They are not necessarily going to help you build it. Yes, there are nuanced cases where they will help it build for you, but you would need an implementation partner who has done this before, and then you partner with that implementation partner to go ahead and hand over the use cases and the kind of what you want, and then they co-discovered the whole process with you, along with you, where you end up choosing an implementation partner as well as a technology partner where you're going to build it. I think it really then boils down to, I guess, that's where the rubber actually hits the road, and then you start building the conversational AI systems itself. It involves, first of all, once you have the use cases and you know the tech stack that you're building on, really starts with building the conversational flow itself. And then in conversation, building the flow or building the conversation journey itself is everything. This example I use a lot with my team is you have people who are good with narratives and then they're not good with narratives. And as you grow up the ladder, you always give examples like art of narratives, art of storytelling is everything. Similarly, when you're building a conversational AI, how does that conversational AI talk to human beings or talk to its intended audience is everything. So you got to spend a lot of time in that conversational design phase where we're trying to make it very human, fun, engaging conversations where people want to actually interact with it as opposed to feel like they're in a dead end experience where things are not going anywhere. I think that's a make or break step, and a lot of companies try to rush through it in terms of hitting, oh yeah, a 90-day rollout and all that. But I think that's very key. Once you have obviously built that flow, then I think training the AI into the lingo that you want your company speaks. So feeding it all the information from your thousands and thousands of documents of knowledge, the internal knowledge that you have, as well as if possible, some systems would consume it, is previous interactions between customers and your company representatives, which can help, again, the system understand the tonality, the choice of words, the just overall kind of look and feel of the conversation. Once all of that gets done, I think obviously you then boil down to the integration paths and all that. And for just like any other systems, conversational AI requires extensive testing. And it is even more important that testing is slightly different from typical integration testing or technology builds as well, because in other cases, you build a functionality. It is a like for like. You have a user story and you have a test case, and then they're usually one for one. In a conversational AI, as you're building the system, you probably are going to market with 800 unique intents that your conversational AI can address. Testing 800 intents with their multiple language variation, that is a pretty daunting ask. And again, a caveat to that we all fall into is not necessarily doing very thorough testing. In recent news, we have seen how Google ran into trouble with their generative AI chatbots with just not doing thorough testing of how it performs. So Google did it twice in 3 years. So if Google is doing it, and I think rest assured, we all fall victim of it. I think it's very important that testing ecosystem is set up from day one, which can avoid a lot of unpleasantries. There's ample examples within Canada as well. Air Canada's chatbot ran into some issues, I think, a couple of months back. Then I think WestJet's chatbot also had an issue. So all that to say, I think you can build a good chatbot or a good conversational AI experience, whether it's in chat or voice. Testing is foundational. And then finally, as you get ready for building and all that, you got to have the right monitoring systems in place because this is a very dynamic experience and it is a learning software. So you want to make sure your software system is learning as you have built it, and then learning is a positive delta. At the same time, you're monitoring anything and everything that's being asked, and then the feedback loop is very strong. So you're learning constantly how people are using it, and you're building incrementally on top of that. In conversational AI, the last thing you want to do is build it and forget it. There is nothing like that in conversational AI. You build it for once, but you are then incrementally adding on it throughout the time that it's out there in the market. There is no stopping of that. So yes, that's probably the kind of key final step.
That's a very comprehensive plan for rolling out a successful implementation. Thank you for that. You touched upon a number of things in your answer. I want to pick on the partner ecosystem and also your own internal team. So let's start with your team. Like, what roles are essential when assembling a team to work on a project like that? And what skills should team members have? Because this is all very new. I know it's been around. Some flavors of it, it's been around for a decade
For
or
sure.
more. But Gen AI and based conversational AI, it's new, right? So
Oh yeah, for sure.
let's talk a little bit about how do you select the right skill set.
Yeah, I think for any people manager or people leader setting up a team, in general, finding the right skill set is always a bit of a challenge. And then when it comes to, and then as you rightly said, something that is a little more trending or somewhat cutting edge in terms of technology, it's very difficult to find the right talent. And even if you have found the right talent, I think it's very difficult to retain it. So that's table stakes. And then I think yes, you learn it once you have started the journey. But in terms of roles, obviously, because you're building an AI system or at least working on an AI system, I think two of the key technical roles that you need is, and then again, depending on how your operational setup is, you would need some sort of a NLP trainer or data scientist. Depend if your operational model is lightweight on your side in terms of actual work that goes behind the scene, then a trainer is enough. But if you're actually maintaining the models yourself, you probably want to look at a data scientist itself. And they're in the same spectrum, just skill sets are changing depending on how strong of a partnership you have. And an AI or NLP trainer and data scientist would be one key set of skill sets that you'd need in your team. Next comes the actual engineers who are going to work on the systems. Again, depends on, I think in today's world, most of us is really going to or expected to use someone else's tech stack to build on top of it. So actually having engineers who can build machine learning systems or conversational AI systems is not really a need, but you will still need engineers from a integration and just building the front end experience perspective. So those will definitely be key. And then comes the most unique role, I think, that has almost came to be since conversational AI came in, is the role called conversational designer or conversation design per se. It's a unique skill set because previous to that, we had content designers who would design content or who would design flow of content. And we would have visual designers who would have kind of designed the visual flow or the user interface and so on and so forth. It's actually with the onset and the rise of conversational AI that this role of conversation design came into play, where at the same time you're thinking of a visual experience, because a conversational flow is just as much a visual thing as it's a content thing. And at the same time, you need content skills because you are actually designing a flow where a human being is being spoken to and it's a back and forth dialogue. So you need to know how to, I guess, write scripts for movies where you actually are talking to human beings. At the same time, you need to know how kind of visually that will be consumed the best way possible. So conversation design, I think, is a very important skill set and rather unique to this space. So that obviously you need good conversational designers in your team. And just to reiterate, I think I said it earlier in one of my answers as well. You could potentially have the best technology behind your conversational AI, but if the quality of the conversation that AI is having with you is not top notch, you're going to fail at either at adoption or at conversion or at resolutions. Something or the other is going to break downstream. Whereas even if you have a subpar technical build or technical backend, but you have an excellent conversational flow and excellent conversational experience, you would come up with an interface which probably doesn't do much, but it is at least high on CSAT and customer kind of positivity in general. And lastly, I think from a role, obviously you need owners, product owners, or just system owners per se. I think in conversational AI space, product owner plays a very big role because at the end of the day, this is new technology. This is very much digital or information technology driven, but at the end of the it is a different interface altogether. You are conversing with a system as opposed to clicking on a system or typing on a system. And I think that changes the game, and having the right product owner owning it will again be a big differentiator in terms of success that you see once you've built it.
I think you nailed it when you said like the customer experience is so critical in this for the success of this project or technology. If you haven't thought through it, the earlier version, chatbots are not new, right? Like you said, they've been around forever. But the difference is this is now Gen AI that the machines could learn on the fly and be conversational. But still, like when you ask a question, you expect a response that you would expect from a person on the other end.
Yeah.
So it directly impacts your experience, and that's the key. And speaking of that, I guess I'm interested in your thoughts on once it's rolled out, like what are some of the KPIs that help you determine whether this is a successful deployment or not?
Yeah, I think obviously when it comes to KPIs, I think the best way forward is always lining it up with your original business objectives, right? Anytime you're trying to do a initiative like this, your business case should lead way for the eventual measure of success and KPIs that we are going to track ourselves against. For any kind of conversational AI, I think there are some table stakes ones that I believe applicable across the board, and they're around containment or deflection, however we want to say it. So some people look at how many sessions or how many interactions are being contained within the conversational AI experience. Some people look at how many sessions are being deflected. I would say it's potato because the calculation turns out to be the same. And very next thing that comes after, which is again very much a table stakes, is the resolution rate. Resolution and containment again can be looked at as two sides of the same coin, but sometimes we build a very general bot experience where it can answer a lot of things, but we don't necessarily are trying to contain everything. For some of the use cases, it is just a triaging mechanism. For some of the use cases, it is a resolution mechanism. So I think that's also important as you set the KPIs, because for any big organizations, they would probably have n number of questions customers are asking. And even if you have built a chatbot which actually is expert in answering like 3 top use cases, you will still have that 300 people will be asking about. So you build the vanilla experience for those, and then where you're trying to just contain or triage some of the traffic. But for the 3 that you are primarily have built on, you want to see what is the end-to-end resolution. Is it actually taking in kind of inquiries and then solving it then and there itself, and then being able to measure that would be key for our success. And once beyond the absolute ROI driven metrics, I think from the actual experience, you want to see accuracy and coverage on a day-to-day basis, because at the end of the day, as I said, it's a learning software. So we need to make sure that what we are learning is the right things, and what we have learned actually answers the questions customers are asking. So learning and accuracy is again very key here. And I think that the last one, and which I personally think is probably just as important as the first ones, but in the world that we live in, it usually comes last, is most companies really don't do a good job of measuring or being able to financially put a value to customer satisfaction. And I think conversational AI's biggest claim to fame is customer experience, because as you said, and I think as we have, many of us have experienced, chatbots are not new. IVR has been there as a technology for 40 plus years.
Exactly.
Chatbot is just really a text version of IVRs where you can have decision trees and you make some selections. It's only recently that when you started infusing chatbots with AI and actual generative capabilities, it has started becoming something relevant, something that people are taking genuine interest in. So the outcome is experience. And unfortunately, most companies fail to measure it well, but the beauty and the real kind of impact is there. And I think kind of as we go forward, that's one thing I'm hoping kind of we get better at measuring and seeing the impact of.
Yeah, maybe if you could shed some light on some of the do's and don'ts on once the project's implemented or while you're considering it.
So I'll probably try to summarize them. First and foremost, I think for anything, for any initiative actually, to be honest, and more so for something which has a sprinkle of innovation in it, we need to have very clear goals and expectations before we start the journey. If the objectives are not clear enough and well understood across the board, you are setting yourself up for failure, because at some point, somebody, whether it's at executive level or it's actual customer level performance, we are going to get questioned about what we have built, why we have built, and how we have built it. And if the goals and objectives are not very clearly defined and articulated, the chances are we're going to run into trouble or just backpedal with the approach that we have taken. The other thing, again, from a do's perspective, is this is conversational AI. We need to make sure we're thinking of the customer first before we build anything. If you're building something because we think this is the right thing to do, it's probably not going to work with customers, because at the end of the day, an organization at its very core builds a chatbot or a conversational AI interface to reduce costs. But if you look at it as when they need the support, they just need the support at that time in the most convenient way possible. And being able to bridge between the two is very important. And then we need to always be on the lookout for that we're building something that really gives customer value as opposed to just business value. And then how we quantify it within our steps within the organization is very key. And the last two, I would say, it is learning software. It is a constantly evolving software. It is not like your other pieces of code that we write and publish, where we have built it once, till it's broken next, just continue living with it. Conversational AI is constantly learning, constantly getting better. I don't think there is a single technology right now available in the market where you build it once and you can just deploy it and then not have to go back to constant incremental enhancements. Yes, generative AI solves for some of it, but still the constant learning is almost an existential thing for any conversational AI application. And lastly, in terms of don'ts, I think it's a flip side of the last statement. I think whether it's executives or whether it's us ourselves, we think because it's AI, and this is probably years of watching Hollywood movies and reading books and science fictions, we see the word AI, we just think from day one it will be able to do everything in the way we expect it to do. And I think that expectation should be managed very well, and then we should try to avoid it as much as possible. If required, put a statement that this AI is a baby AI, and then for it to become an adult, it will take a journey. So let's just make sure we do that. And I remember in one of my presentations, I had actually put that we're taking baby steps. So let's not expect us to take adult strides from day one. So it's very important that expectation is managed. And the other piece, I think I probably missed it, and I know you summed it up really well, is privacy and data concerns with any AI systems is very high. And I think as we see these models coming up, and we miss probably some of the times that at the rate people are talking about things like ChatGPT and Gemini and Copilot, there is a very strong parallel stream of news about potentially copyright violations and customer data privacy and just more information being fed into the systems than it should be. If we are building, depending on the technology that we're building on, we need to put very strong guardrails to protect our customers' data, not just because the regulatory bodies are going to be after it. It is our responsibility as custodians of customer data to make sure those data sets are not being exposed to systems where, number one, it can be misused, and number two, just fundamentally, it shouldn't be used for purposes beyond what they have given us consent to use it for. So that'll be probably the other don't. And then lastly, again, I think I've mentioned it a few times, it's important that we don't miss out on the fact that training and spending a lot of time understanding the data that's flowing in to make incremental improvements is missed, because again, database decision making or just data driven decision making, as we say it, it's something we like all talking about, but I do feel that once you've built something, the data is really just used for reporting and not necessarily closing the loop, like what needs to happen next. When it comes to conversational AI, that data is everything. So we need to make the best use of the data to actually make incremental improvements. So let's try to avoid taking it as just the regular data that we see from our other systems flowing in.
Thank you. We're coming up on our time. As I just want to ask you one last question before we wrap things up. I guess looking towards the future, how do you see the conversational AI evolving, and what should businesses do now to prepare for those changes?
That's a loaded one, and I feel the answer I'm going to give you today, maybe 2 weeks down the line, at the rate things are changing, I'll probably have a different version of that answer. But I think we will probably discuss some of it already in our discussion, that conversational AI started as nothing but a glorified decisioning experience to now we are seeing people powering conversational AI with generative AI, which is a beast of its own. And I don't want to get into the discussion of what generative AI can stand for potentially in terms of impact. But yeah, I do feel conversational AI is at a state where it's leapfrogging, and from just being a technology where it talks like humans, can act or pretend to be a human, now it's plugged into generative AI, which has borderline human-like intelligence, and we can actually think of the days where instead of having a virtual assistant, we can actually have virtual agents, like where a true 100% replication of a human being's roles and responsibilities can be replicated, because the machine-based brain power as well as the machine-based language capability, they both have come of age. So that's something I'm really excited about, and I think companies are already trying to build technologies like that, where we think like almost a true like-for-like virtual agent experience will be available, and when we could potentially have fully autonomous customer support centers which can speak, chat, do video calls, whichever interface you want to consume it at, just because the technology is very close to being there. The thing that we need to also think about for that future is organizationally adopt like a AI first culture. I think back in the day there was a data first culture, and then there was a cloud first culture, and I think as we are going forward, we need to have a AI first culture within the organization, where AI should be looked at as an augmentation of human capabilities, an augmentation of our business outcomes, rather than potentially a replacement. Because just as I said, virtual agent, I think people listening into it would naturally assume that is job losses, but it's not that. It's an augmentation of what we can do. So today, if we have a 10% growth rate for our workforce just because business is growing, tomorrow we can actually potentially have the same number of people servicing 20 times more customers just because now we are deploying more experiences and interfaces that can kind of just help augment our human abilities. So those are the kind of big ones. I think kind of at least in the next 3 to 5 years, I see kind of becoming big. Canada usually has been a bit of a laggard in terms of adoption of conversational AI. So I'm hoping kind of with the governmental push towards AI and just generative AI in general, I think that becomes a little more standardized across the board. So yeah, that's what keeps me excited about this industry.
Fantastic. Well, Sabih, it's been a pleasure discussing these insights with you. Your expertise has undoubtedly shed light on the intricate process of integrating conversational AI into business strategies. To our listeners, we hope today's episode helps you navigate your own AI initiatives. Sabih, thank you for joining us today. And to everyone, keep listening, keep growing, and stay tuned for more insightful episodes here at Behind the Growth. Until next time, this is Imran Mian wishing you all a healthy, inspired, and growth-filled day ahead.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Growth. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow along on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. This podcast is brought to you by Mobile Live, a team of digital experts bringing intelligence and efficiency to how businesses sell, serve, and save. For more episodes of Behind the Growth, please visit mobilelive.ca/podcast.